Hey troops, welcome to the channel Dit Commando. My name's Ryan and I'm a former British Royal Marines Commando, and today we're going to be reacting to Death Row, the United States versus Japan. What's the difference? So it's going to be quite an interesting one, this. I know both countries hold the death penalty still, so yeah, let's see what the crack is with all the differences. It's probably going to touch on things like who's more ruthless and things like that, who treats their prisoners more humane, XYZ. So yeah, we'll get straight into this one, guys, but before we do, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. I really do appreciate if you do help me out that way. But other than that, guys, we're just going to get straight into it. Enjoy it.
Imagine a prisoner sitting in solitary confinement, waiting to die. He has no idea when it'll happen, but he knows it's inevitable. Think of the fear, the anxiety, the stress this prisoner must feel. He wakes up every day.
Now, there's one thing I'll say straight off the back of that. Not all prisoners are going to be feeling anxiety, stress, or anything else, you know. There's quite a lot of people who end up on death row have committed extremely serious crimes, all right, warranting us to believe that there's probably something psychologically wrong with a lot of these people. Not all of them, but, you know, death row doesn't mess about, guys. You've been put on that place for a very, very hardcore reason. So I don't think a lot of them will be stressed.
Not knowing if it's his last. He falls asleep at night not knowing if he'll be pulled from his bed to die. The prisoner awakes for the day. He sits
again, an exaggeration. He will be knowing if he's going to be pulled from his bed. They do get prior warning. It's not like the Green Mile where they get told, yeah, come on, we're going to the chair now. These people get, like, they go through a process, okay, quite a legal and thorough process in most cases anyway. I'm not sure about Japan though.
Alone with only his thoughts. Water trickles down the sides of the windowless concrete walls that make up his cell. He's pacing back and forth when there's a clunk. The door to his cell unlatches. It swings open. When the prisoner looks out through the open doorway, all he sees is a long, empty hall. He cautiously exits the room. The door at the far end of the hallway slides open with a hiss. The prisoner walks slowly, unsure of what's to come. When he's halfway down the hall, the door to his cell slams shut and locks automatically. The only way to go is forward. He enters the doorway at the end of the hall. The glaring light from within the room blinds him. Standing in the room is a hooded figure. In his hand is a noose. The time has finally come. The wait is over. The prisoner walks calmly over and allows the noose to be placed around his neck. He's relieved.
Right, unless there's kind of another agenda for him to be talking like this, i.e. he's going to explain how that isn't the case. This is pretty stupid so far, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments.
That the wait and the not knowing is finally over. The hooded figure leaves the room. It's silent again. Time goes by, then suddenly, the floor beneath the prisoner drops. The rope tightens. The execution is carried out. This may seem like a cruel punishment from earlier times, but it's not. It's happening right now. This scenario is part of being a prisoner on death row in Japan. Let's compare.
Whoa, okay, so that is actually taking that's took me back a bit. Right, I thought it was going to be you know, introducing how it isn't going in these countries, but the fact that it is like that in Japan, they pretty much walk up to the noose. Wow, that's old school, guys. That's old school medieval type stuff.
The death row process of Japan and the United States. You'll find some of the practices in these two developed nations to be surprising and not as developed as you might think. There are only two first world democracies on the entire planet that still execute their own citizens. These two nations are Japan and the United States of America. On average,
right, hear what he said there. There are only two first world countries that still execute imprisoned people. I don't know, guys, what's your thoughts on this whole thing? Do you think the death penalty should exist still? I don't know where I sit on this one, to be fair. In some cases, in some horrendous crimes, then yes, I can see how it's warranted. And in other cases, I can see how it probably isn't warranted, you know. But I don't know where I think with this. I guess I'll make my mind up, or at least try to, by the end of this video. But let me know in the comments what you think. Is it right? Is it justified, the death penalty?
Average, Japan incarcerates far fewer people than the United States. In Japan, out of every 100,000 people, 39 are sent to prison at least once in their life. In the United States, about 655 people per 100,000 are sent to.
That is an incredible number, guys. I know it's not reached over the 1,000, but yeah, that number is pretty scary. It's really high.
jail. This disparity between incarceration rates may make you think that Japan has a better prison system and therefore a more humane form of death row. You might be shocked at what we uncover as we explore the death row practices of Japan and compare them to the US. Death row is the term given to the time from when someone is convicted and sentenced to death until the execution date. Let's start by looking at how Japan and the United States differ in the sentencing of prisoners who end up on death row. In the United States, a person who is arrested has the right to remain silent, and an attorney present during questioning seem normal to a lot of us, but that's not the case in Japan. When questioned in Japan, the accused is not allowed representation. They may remain silent, but as we'll see, this tends not to work out. In Japan, police can keep suspects in custody for up to 23 days without evidence. There have been reports of Japanese police torturing suspects both mentally and physically to get a confession. It was
Right, okay, so the immediate difference there is they're not really allowed any kind of representation, which for me should be a fundamental human right when being questioned in a law capacity, okay, in a criminal capacity. It's just insane to think that they're not really being represented at all, and they can be held for 23 days without any evidence. That to me is... It's crazy to think, guys. All right, I do come from I'm a former Royal Marines Commando, but I specialised as a service police investigator, so that's kind of my specialist role. So I do understand the law and the practicing of it. So this to me is pretty crazy.
It wasn't until 2016 that Japan instituted a mandatory video recording of interrogations. Unfortunately for the suspect, this only applies to 3% of Japan's criminal cases. The only interrogations that are recorded are for serious charges such as murder. All other interrogations are done in secret. In contrast, the United States justice system requires that there be a third party present during questioning of a suspect. The prisoner can waive their right to counsel, but this is rare. Even in these uncommon cases without a lawyer present, the interrogations are still monitored. One main reason for this is to keep police from forcing a confession using unreliable methods.
Yeah, which is really important. Like I said, it's a human right. It shows and aids the process of justice, all right? It makes it fairer. If you're an innocent man, then you would like to think that the process would able you to walk free. You know, if you say the things that are truthful, then yeah, right will be done, so to speak. But to not video these conversations or even record the voice is crazy again to me. You know, when I was in that capacity, we would always, at the very least, tape record the audio and transcribe it as well for the courts to be able to understand that information verbatim, what was spoken about. So yeah, it's crazy, guys.
Nations and other human rights advocates have concluded through numerous studies that confessions through torture and inhumane practices are almost never reliable. Unfortunately, the Japanese criminal justice system does not see it that way. Iwao Hakamata was arrested.
Right, how can they not see it that way? Let me know in the chat if there's anything possible that would justify them not seeing it that way, unless they're against, you know, the right thing being done.
And later convicted for the murders of several people in Japan. He claimed he was subjected to more than 240 hours of questions over 20 days. There were no video recordings of the interrogation process, so we'll never know what actually happened during that time. However, the amount of time Hakamata spent in custody is undeniable. Iwao was one of the few who appealed his death sentence and was granted a hearing, but the hearing never came. For 5 decades, Iwao sat in solitary confinement on death row, making him the longest-serving death row inmate ever. Recently, his sister, with the support of various legal organizations, convinced the district court to order a retrial. The district court decided to free Iwao to await his retrial at home. He was released from prison due to his fragile mental state after spending almost 50 years on death row. Unfortunately, Iwao is still waiting for his retrial, and if found guilty a second time, he could go back to prison. Until then, Iwao sits at home, waiting to see if he'll become a free man or return to death row. In the United States,
that's a horrendous situation for anyone to be in, guys. Okay, now just think about this for a second. 240 hours in 20 days is a lot. It is an incredible amount of interrogation. Now, some say that interrogation actually goes the opposite way. It depends on how hard you interrogate someone, okay? Now, think about this for a second. If you put someone under horrendous stress, all right, they're going to pretty much if you put them under enough stress, they're going to admit to things that they didn't do to stop the stress from occurring. Okay, that's why interrogation doesn't really work in many circumstances, this one included.
States, as in most democracies, confessions obtained after more than 200 hours of interrogation are ruled as involuntary, unreliable, and cannot be used as evidence in court. This is not the case in Japan, which may be why the country has a 99% conviction rate. When there is someone arrested for a crime and a confession is secured by police, regardless of the means, that person is guilty. The evidence against them may be shoddy and they may have been tortured, but that does not stop the state from convicting them. Prosecutors tend to only pursue cases they think will lead to a guilty verdict. This is practically everyone who is brought to court. Since crime rates are so low in Japan, someone who is brought to court is already assumed to be guilty. Jurors automatically assume they've committed the crime even before hearing the evidence. This
is crazy. This is absolutely crazy, guys.
Leads to an easy conviction and a high conviction rate. The United States also has a high conviction rate. In the US, conviction rates have risen over the decades and are currently around 90%. However, only Japan can boast a conviction rate of 99%. With higher conviction rates, are there higher execution rates in Japan than the US? The most recent data from Japan reports that 24 people were executed between 2012 and 2016. However, since 1977, the annual number of executed inmates has never been more than 9 people in a year. In 1998,
okay, so there's got a very high conviction rate, 99%, but the crime rate is very low. So normally, yeah, that would allow you to assume that the people that are being, charged are guilty, but we couldn't always rely on that. The fact that they've got quite a low number of people on death row, I don't know. There's a few things that I don't agree with, but the numbers are making a lot more sense, guys. Let me know in the chat if you agree.
The Japanese Justice Ministry released a report that stated 7 people were executed in 1 week, which was the largest number of executions in that amount of time. Regardless of how you feel about the death penalty, the United States execution rates are startling. In 2018 alone, 25 death row inmates were executed. That's more than Japan executes in 3 years. In 2019, 22 prisoners were executed in the US. This is just 2.
Yeah, but they've got a higher conviction. They've got higher amounts of inmates, so that doesn't stagger me. I'm not alarmed at that. I know it's a crazy number still, but I was expecting that to be a lot more.
Less than all of the executions in Japan between 2012 and 2016. Japan may have a higher conviction rate than the US, but the US executes many more prisoners than Japan does. This may be shocking, but there is of course also a massive population difference between the two nations, meaning more
infographics is a great source of information, but they sometimes do, I think they like to stir things up, maybe to create a bit of debate on the subject. I don't know, but yeah, they're good at what they do.
Criminals in one than the other, and thus more capital punishment. Once convicted and sent to death row, do inmates have any rights? In the US, there are human rights organizations that monitor the conditions for inmates on death row. Almost all of these human rights organizations agree that the death penalty and the preceding trial violate the prisoner's rights. And it's not just inmates on death row that have it hard. These conditions...
Think about this then. Is it inhumane? Is it against a human right to take someone's life, whether it's, a law's being passed, whether you've been convicted of it, whether a conviction has went the wrong way or what? Is it humane or inhumane? I think it's inhumane for another person to state that this person should not live anymore. Although I have said it, earlier in the video, that there's certain crimes where I think, yeah, fair one, yeah, maybe he's deserved that, but deserving it is different to it should happen. Do you understand? Just because they deserve it doesn't mean that they still should get the death penalty. There's plenty of people deserve the death penalty, but who has the right overall to be able to say that? I mean, who plays God in this? You know what I mean?
For regular prisoners in the US can be harsh. If you don't believe us, watch any of the other infographic show videos on prisons. I think you'll be surprised at what you find. In Japan, things are a little more tricky when it comes to basic rights. Like in the United States, death row inmates can appeal to the Supreme Court for another hearing. Unfortunately for the inmates in Japan, just because you appeal does not guarantee you won't be executed before your case can be heard. There are multiple accounts of prisoners who requested retrials and were executed while waiting to hear back about pending court dates. The law in Japan says that the execution must take place within 6 months of the court's decision. In reality, the executions take years, but just because you have a pending retrial does not mean you're protected from being executed in Japan. One problem that plagues both countries' death row inmates is that many suffer from mental illness. This factor is often overlooked, and when these prisoners are put in isolation, their conditions can deteriorate rapidly. Both Japan and the US keep death row prisoners in solitary confinement until it's time for their execution. These harsh conditions of isolation
I don't know about you, but
heavily on older inmates. For this population, solitary confinement can lead to an increase in physical disabilities, causing excruciating pain for older inmates. Two of the most
Again, that is inhumane. You know, they're still waiting judgment. They're still waiting the execution date, but they still have a right to a comfortable living. You know, and if they're suffering from mental health, then that should be treated. They have the right to health treatment, you know, and health care. So the fact that it's a little bit shabby, it doesn't upset me, because a lot of these people, you know, deserve to be on death row. But I do think it's a human right to be given care when needed.
most profound differences between death row in Japan and in the US are the date and the way prisoners are executed. In the United States, execution dates are set in advance. This is considered to be better for the inmate's mental stability. Japan,
I agree. That's what I always thought as well. I always presumed that, you know, they were given a date beforehand. You know, they could mentally prepare, if you can mentally prepare for it. But, you know, they've got a bit of time then to think about what's going on, you know.
on the other hand, does not give predetermined execution dates. Instead, inmates on death row in Japan could be executed at any point after being sentenced. Many don't find out they're to be executed until the morning of their capital punishment.
That could be, yeah, that could be really, I can't imagine that. That must be horrendous, guys, okay?
This often leaves inmates with only about an hour or two to prepare themselves for what's to come. The UN Committee Against Torture has criticized Japan for this practice. The psychological strain of not knowing when the execution will occur is literal torture, not only to the inmate, but to their families as well. It is true that the United States prisoners do get a request a last meal. Some prison systems honor everything an inmate asks for, but others do not. Either way, death row prisoners do get a final meal. Since there's no set date of execution in Japan, inmates do not get a final meal on the day they're to be executed. If you had to guess right now, which country do you think would have a more humane execution? Would it be Japan with their surprise executions, or the United States with its high number of executions?
This is a tricky one. I'm just going to go with common sense here. No, I'm not going to go with common sense. I'm going to go with what I think. I think Japan would have a more humane way. However, what's classed as humane, all right, is being put to death by any means humane? That's the question, I guess. So drop a comment below, guys. What's a humane way to die, I guess?
One way better than the other? We'll let you be the judge. In Japan, executions are carried out by hanging. The inmate is blindfolded and a black hood is placed over their head before they're executed. To release the executioners of their burden, 3 prison officers simultaneously press the button for the trapdoor to open. This way, they'll never know which button pusher was ultimately responsible for taking the prisoner's life. In the United
No, I'm not being funny. All 3 of them pressed it then, you know? I mean, come on.
States, things work a little differently. Most often the prisoner is executed by lethal injection. The deadly cocktail varies by state, but normally it consists of some form of paralytic before a final poison is administered. This is often done by people without any medical training. It makes sense when you think about it, as administering the chemicals to kill someone would be in breach of a medical professional's Hippocratic oath. But unlike in Japan, the person who is carrying out the execution knows without a doubt they are the ones who delivered death to the inmate. Also, unlike Japan,
How must that rest on their conscience to do that? That's got to really play on their minds, guys. I know a lot of military veterans, they suffer with extreme levels of PTSD because of the lives that they've taken, you know, because in the line of duty, in the call of duty, they've been expected to do so, and when that time come, they have acted upon it. But years later, they seem to, well, it's not they seem to. There's consequences, and them actions will come to haunt many of those individuals, unfortunately. All right, and I do feel sorry for those guys. So how is this? How is this? This is a similar concept, isn't it?
The United States allows execution methods to be determined at the state level rather than having one standard federal policy. Some states even allow the executee to choose their method of execution. States like Alabama and Tennessee in the United States allow their prisoners to choose which method they'd like to die from. This led to some inmates asking for execution by electric chair. The electric chair was discontinued after it became considered more humane to use chemicals to kill a prisoner. This could be because the outward appearance of someone being cooked alive by electricity is less desirable than a prisoner that quietly drifts off to sleep and then dies. But in states that allow prisoners to choose their form of execution, several have opted to go by electric chair. Another form of...
Really? Why on earth would you want to go by the electric chair when... Oh, my goodness. I don't know, guys. It's the mindset of these individuals, though, that we got to remember here, okay?
Execution that prisoners in the U.S. have chosen to die by is firing squad. In 2010, Ronnie Lee Gardner was killed by firing squad in Utah. Is it more humane to let someone decide how they'll be executed? Maybe, but if you...
Yeah, I think it probably is. They're getting a choice in the matter, really, aren't they?
Take into consideration the mental health of prisoners, it's probably not. One of the most surprising differences between the death row in Japan and in the United States has to do with the general population. Japan has a much higher support rate for the death penalty than the US. 80% of Japanese citizens support the death penalty, whereas in
Right, that is crazy high.
2018, only 54% of United States citizens support the death penalty.
And that's around what I would have guessed, about half-y-half.
Even if you disagree with the way Japan carries out executions, the majority of Japanese citizens do not. The differences between death row in Japan and death row in the US are clear. What is less clear is if one is better than the other, or if there should be a death row at all. In 2019, Japan approved a decision to stop using the death penalty by 2020. Huge amounts of pressure were put on them by human rights organizations, including the United Nations, to abolish the death penalty before Japan hosted the Olympic Games. The resolution was...
Okay, so where does America stand in that then? Do you see them getting rid of the death penalty? I honestly don't. I don't think they'll get rid of the death penalty at all. Do you guys think that's a good idea, a bad idea? Let me know in the comments.
Submitted to the heads of the government in Japan. The death penalty has still not been abolished, but to be fair, the United States has hosted the Olympics several times in the past, most recently...
That's my point, really. If they're going to use the Olympic Games as the moral compass to get rid of the death penalty, then it doesn't really make any sense, does it? Because, America's had the, like you say, had hosted it many times.
Recently in 2002, yet the United States still uses the death penalty. Apparently not getting rid of death row to host the Olympics is something Japan and the US have in common. For more prison facts...
Right then, let's have a chat about this one, guys. So, the question originally was, what's the difference? But I guess we've kind of moved on to another question. Who's worse? Who's got it worse? I don't know, guys. I think Japan's got it worse in the sense of you may find yourself in a prison on death row because of means where you haven't really had the chance to defend yourself legally because you're not allowed representation. You can be questioned for a stupid amount of time, and pretty much you're guilty before you've even had a chance to plead your innocence. Now, on the other hand, in America, where the judicial system is a lot better, a lot more fairer, you're pretty much going to go and enter a prison system where there's a lot more people there. You've got a higher chance of being in prison, all right? They put more people away in prison than a lot of countries around the world, so I wouldn't want to be in either, if I'm honest with you. And in terms of what's better, hanging or a lethal injection or something, hey, guys, I wouldn't want to choose that, all right? It's all bad at the end of the day, so... yeah, I'm not going to call that one. Okay. What do you reckon? What do you think? What's the difference? Who's got it better? Who's got it worse? I'm probably swaying more towards Japan, if I'm honest with you. But if they do what they say they do, and they're going to abolish it soon, then it'll just be America doing that. So, yeah, guys, I really like this one, actually. If you did, like, share, and subscribe. Members, thank you for supporting the channel. I really do appreciate you guys. If you want to become a member, press the join button. You're helping me do these videos each and every day, which I'm grateful for. beyond belief. All right, you're helping me put food on my table. So thank you very much, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.